India's military was entirely Western made in 1947, but it is now heavily dependent on Russia. Let's take a look at how this happened. India gained its independence from British colonial rule in 1947, but it also faced a violent partition that created the new state of Pakistan.
1 million people become refugees overnight. Pakistan and India each say they are determined to stop the wholesale rioting. But meanwhile, the exodus continues.
The British Indian Army, which had fought in both world wars, was divided between the two countries, along with the Royal Indian Air Force and the Royal Indian Navy. The partition also left behind a disputed territory of Kashmir, which sparked the First Indo-Pakistani War in 1947 to 1948. India inherited most of the British military equipment and infrastructure, while Pakistan received some assistance from the United States. India also relied on British support for its air force and navy, as well as for spare parts and maintenance. The story begins in 1962. In 1962, India's military was largely British-made. The air force was crewed by British-made Hunters, Nats and Canberra bombers. The army and navy were also largely Western-made. INS Vikrant, India's first aircraft carrier, was bought from Britain, but there were problems with Western defense sales to India. First, the West was actively arming Pakistan, which had signed a military partnership agreement with the US in 1954. While India warned that Pakistan would use these weapons against India, the West denied this. This caused tensions. While Pakistan received a flood of Western weapons on favorable terms, India felt shortchanged by the West. An Indian diplomat who served as the Foreign Secretary under Jawaharlal Nehru and Lal Bahadur Shastri, Y.D. Gundevia, claimed that we were forced into buying arms, gun for gun, and aircraft for aircraft, in hard cash, at the cost of everything else in our low-powered economy. These tensions were because of India's larger non-aligned foreign policy. America's President Eisenhower and his top diplomats took, with us or against us, approach to diplomacy. Because India has not explicitly aligned with United States in the Cold War, defense ties were strained. Western defense supplies could also be unreliable. A key example was Britain's Canberra bombers, which India bought in 1957. More than halfway through the deal, Britain told India that it could not sell it bombs to go with the Canberras, since they were on a NATO secret list. India threatened to cancel the deal, after which the UK informed Delhi that the bombs were, miraculously, no longer on the secret list. From aircraft to submarines, Western powers were increasingly unwilling to sell India equipment in the 1950s and 60s. That's where the Soviets came in. At first, India wasn't sure about the Soviets, New Delhi had their suspicions. Until 1962, India had bought no weapons from the Soviet Union. But then, the 1962 war between India and China took place, where India suffered serious setbacks. The West, on which India was dependent for weapons, provided a limited amount of support. The United States ambassador was, in 1963, making it clear to us, categorically, that we should not ever hope to get enough war material from them to throw the Chinese aggressors out of Aksai Chin, in the northeast. At best, we were clearly told, we might hope for just enough help to defend ourselves a little better, in case of any repetition of Chinese incursions of the kind we had suffered the year before, Gundevia said. That was when India began reaching out to the Soviets for arms. The Soviets, unlike the West, did not make political demands. For example, after the defeat in the 1962 war, India wanted to improve connectivity to Ladakh in case China tried to fight another war. So, it asked to purchase America's C-130 transport aircraft. Despite selling these planes to Pakistan, United States was unwilling to sell to India. US Ambassador John Galbraith told the Indians that the planes were too expensive for India and hummed and hawed about a sale. Left with no choice, India bought the Soviet-made AN-12s. United States also lectured India about costs when it tried to buy the F-104 supersonic fighter, but sold it to Pakistan. When India wanted submarines, Britain asked India to wait for 3 years and offered to sell obsolete designs. So, in 1962 India went out and bought the Soviet MiG-21. It was first major deal between India and the Soviet Union. The Soviets didn't lecture India and offered more subs than India requested. The Soviets didn't ask India for political support while the West always pushed for India's backing in the Cold War. When India fought the 65 war with Pakistan and United States had imposed an arms embargo on India. During the war, India's supply of British-made Centurion tanks had declined. Cut off from Western arms supplies, India requested T-54 tanks from Yugoslavia. Gundevia made the request to the country's defense minister. The minister responded, "You want T-54 tanks? There are none on our assembly lines just now. But we will pick them up from the fields, Mr. Secretary, and send them to you as fast as we can." Soviet flexibility on terms and its unwillingness to push India to take sides built trust. India also signed a treaty of peace, friendship and cooperation with the Soviet Union in 1971, which provided mutual security assurances and diplomatic support. The treaty was seen as a counterbalance to the US-Pakistan alliance and China's growing influence in Asia. The treaty also enabled India to launch a decisive military intervention in East Pakistan, now Bangladesh, in 1971, which resulted in a decisive victory for India and the creation of a new independent state of Bangladesh. The Soviet Union provided diplomatic cover for India at the United Nations Security Council, vetoing any resolutions that could have imposed a ceasefire or sanctions on India. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 posed a major challenge for India's defense procurement and partnership with Moscow. India faced a shortage of spare parts, maintenance, and upgrades for its Soviet origin equipment, as well as delays and cancellations of some contracts. India also faced economic difficulties due to its balance of payments crisis and had to cut down on its defense spending. India also faced a changing security environment in the post-Cold War era, with new threats and challenges emerging from terrorism, nuclear proliferation, cyber warfare, and regional instability. India also had to deal with the rise of China as a major economic and military power, as well as the resurgence of Pakistan as a nuclear-armed state and a sponsor of cross-border terrorism. India also had to cope with the changing dynamics of global politics, with the United States emerging as the sole superpower and seeking to expand its influence and interests in Asia. India responded to these challenges by adopting a more pragmatic and diversified approach to its defense procurement and partnership. India sought to reduce its dependence on any single supplier and to acquire the best weapons and technology from multiple sources. India also sought to enhance its indigenous defense industry and capabilities, as well as to develop strategic partnerships with other countries that shared its interests and values. India continued to maintain its close ties with Russia, which remained its largest and most trusted defense partner. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something new. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more videos. Also, let me know in the comments what you think about India's foreign policy and what other topics you would like me to cover.